Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a deeply sobering topic, but honestly it's one that is absolutely critical for all of us to understand. We're going to break down how one single tragic day fundamentally altered the architecture, the design, and the daily security of American schools. We'll be walking through the data, the timeline, and the entirely new architectural philosophy that emerged from a national tragedy. So let's actually start by going back to Friday, December 14th, 2012. Picture this. More than 400 students were sitting in class at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. It was a completely normal, quiet morning. That is, until the clock struck 9:35 a.m. and a chilling 911 call came in. The dispatcher asked for the location of the emergency, and the caller simply said, "I think there's somebody shooting in here." That exact moment shattered the peace of the school, and truly, it changed American education forever. Section 1. 5 minutes in Sandy Hook. The absolutely crucial, staggering number we need to understand right up front, it's 5. This entire horrific attack on Sandy Hook Elementary lasted just under 5 minutes before law enforcement arrived. I mean, think about how incredibly short that time frame is. When you're sharing a building with the shooter, those minutes move so differently. Staff responded instinctively, some protecting students, others bravely trying to intervene, but the sheer speed of the event was completely overwhelming. Because within that impossibly short 5-minute window, the shooter managed to fire an astonishing 154 rounds. Armed with 2 handguns and a semi-automatic rifle, he literally shot his way through the locked front doors and unleashed an unprecedented level of violence in a matter of mere moments. And tragically, those 5 minutes cost 26 people their lives. We're talking about 20 children, all between the ages of just 6 and 7 years old, alongside 6 adult staff members. To this day, it remains one of the deadliest school shootings ever carried out by a single person in the United States. So how did this happen? Well, tracing the background of the 20-year-old shooter, Adam Lanza, reveals a highly documented decline. His struggles actually started way back in childhood, with severe sensory issues, a total inability to be touched, and obsessive hand-washing. By 5th grade, it escalated. He wrote a violent story that really alarmed his teachers. Then, by age 16, his world kind of collapsed. His parents divorced, he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, anxiety, and severe OCD. But here is the crucial turning point. When he was prescribed medication and therapy, he flat out refused them. Flash forward to 2012, and he was living in total isolation. He literally covered his bedroom windows with garbage bags and communicated with his mother living in the same house only via email. His sole connection to the outside world became guns, which his mother owned and actually took him out to shoot, and a really dark fixation. He kept a meticulous spreadsheet of past school shooters and became obsessed with the layout of Sandy Hook, which was a school he had actually attended as a child. It's a slow, documented decline that ultimately culminated in him killing his mother at home before driving the 5 miles to the elementary school. Section 2. America's paradoxical legislative response. Now, in the wake of a tragedy like this, you might expect lawmakers to immediately tighten rules across the board, right? Well, the legislative reality over the following year actually took a completely surprising direction. Out of 109 firearm-related laws passed nationwide, 70 of them actually loosened regulations. Instead of restricting access, many states expanded exactly where and how guns could be carried. In some states, this meant explicitly allowing teachers to carry weapons. In others, it allowed students to keep them secured in their vehicles on campus. The undeniable result of this legislative wave was that guns became more common around schools, not less. Section 3. When fire safety fails. With guns becoming a more common presence, the heavy burden of protection suddenly shifted directly onto the buildings themselves. And that brings us to the actual architecture of Sandy Hook. Like most schools of its era, it was perfectly designed for fire safety, supervision, and efficiency. It checked all the right boxes for a rapid fire evacuation. But in an active shooter scenario, that exact design revealed fatal flaws. Long, straight corridors provided the shooter with uninterrupted lines of sight. Having classrooms placed super close together meant incredibly easy access from one room to the next. And perhaps the most devastating detail? To comply with fire codes preventing kids from accidentally locking themselves in, the classroom doors only locked from the outside. So without meaning to, the building's design gave the shooter a massive advantage, instead of slowing him down. Section 4. Redesigning schools for survival. Realizing this, architects across the country had to completely change their approach. They adopted a real game changer of a concept called CPTED, or Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. The core philosophy here is brilliantly simple but highly effective. Basically, crime naturally happens where it's easiest and least risky. Therefore, if you design the physical environment to make an attack significantly harder and riskier for the perpetrator, it inherently becomes less likely to happen. School architects started planning for mass shootings the exact same way they've always planned for fires or earthquakes, using the physical architecture of the school itself as a primary deterrent. And this triggered a total 180 in design philosophy. We moved away from the old design of street corridors and replaced them with curved or broken hallways, making it so much harder to see far down a path or to move quickly between spaces. We shifted from closely packed rooms to distant classrooms with far fewer entrances. And critically, those outside locking doors, gone, replaced by secure inside locking doors, making it entirely possible for teachers to lock down and protect their students without ever having to step out into a dangerous hallway. But here is the stark reality you really need to take away from this. A building itself cannot completely stop a determined attacker. That's not even the goal anymore. The ultimate goal of all this new architecture is simply to slow them down. It's engineered entirely to buy a few extra seconds. Because as the data shows us from these incredibly fast-moving 5-minute scenarios, just a few extra seconds are literally enough to save lives while waiting for law enforcement to arrive. Section 5. The cost of fortress schools. Now, here's where things get really complicated. Despite all these modern architectural defenses, school shootings haven't slowed down. Since 1966, there have been over 3,000 incidents, but we saw an unprecedented, massive spike between 2020 and 2023. It reached an absolute peak of 351 firearm-related incidents in American schools in 2023 alone. To put that into perspective, that averages out to nearly one incident every single day. They're happening in cities, in small towns, in elementary schools, and on college campuses. The architecture is absolutely better, but the frequency is undeniably higher. And this engineering pivot has resulted in a staggering new normal for today's students, what we can basically call a modern fortress reality. Just to get through a standard academic year, an astonishing 95% of public schools in America now hold active lockdown, evacuation, and shelter-in-place drills. 85% of schools employ specialized behavioral assessment teams to try and identify students at risk. Armed guards, pervasive security cameras, and even metal detectors have just become standard everyday sights for kids who are simply going to learn. So on paper, schools definitely look safer and more prepared than ever before. But, of course, there's a major hidden cost here. While physical safety might be improved by these curved walls and heavy security protocols, psychologists are actively sounding the alarm on the psychological toll. Constant, repeated exposure to realistic lockdown drills and fortress-like environments actively increases stress, fear, and anxiety, particularly in younger children. We are essentially asking their kids to carry a really heavy psychological burden the moment they step into a classroom. So we've redesigned the buildings, we've implemented the intense drills, we've completely fortified the doors. But with hundreds of incidents still occurring every single year, we are faced with a final inescapable question. If turning schools into literal fortresses didn't actually solve the issue, then what else needs to change? It's a massive question that goes way beyond just architecture, and it's one we must all deeply consider for the future of education. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep learning.